O2, and it's time for us to get the show on the road. Like I said, my name is Chuma Moma, and we'll be talking about something very, very important. Something that we all ask ourselves when we're writing books, writing articles, writing posts, even sending text messages. I don't need to edit, do I? We wonder, do we need to edit every single thing? And sometimes we do, especially when we're writing a book. It's very important to edit. Next slide. And of course, this is what we're all here for. Our workshop, we have our beautiful special guest, our speaker. She's an educator, a researcher, children's author, and a young writers advocate. Her name is Adeola Eze. Thank you. So, Mrs. Eze, we're in good hands with you. Obviously, very well-read, very experienced, and you know a whole lot about this topic. So we're going to hand over to you and allow you to take charge for the next 40 minutes or so as you make your presentation. Thank you very much.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so very much for that introduction. I'm so very glad to be here with you today. I say a very huge thank you to ACAIN and to Kesina Kigo, who has been following up with this whole thing, and also to our chairperson, Mrs. Aboderin Talabi, for this wonderful session. I'm so very glad. And I hope that you will all find it both enlightening and enriching. I believe the topic is something that tugs at the heart of every writer. And I think there is no better time to be having this conversation than now. So I welcome you all to your new level as writers and as authors of children's books. So I'm going to move very quickly to my slides now. All right, so you met me. I'm Adeola Eze. I want to request that you follow me as Adeola Eze, Adeola_Eze on Instagram, and then follow the work that we do at jordanhill.ed. I don't need an editor, do I? That's the million-dollar question tonight, and that's what we'll be talking about. And I'm thinking, why a book editor? Why are we talking about it in the first instance? Why does it garner so much interest that it has become a topic of discussion? So this evening, my discussion will be placed against the backdrop of traditional publishing, and which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. And when I mean traditional publishing, I'm basically talking about publishing in which the author is given a contract by the publisher, who then prints and publishes and sells to the bookstores or to bookshops or to schools or what have you. So my focus is on this because if you can get it right at this level, then you would have succeeded in raising the bar for yourself, should you decide to self-publish or go the hybrid publishing way. That said, let's move on quickly into our talk tonight. As a writer, you're definitely wondering, as Mrs. Mama said earlier on, you might be asking what an editor can do for you, or you might be searching for tips on how to approach an editor, or wondering what your new editor at a proposed publishing firm would be in charge of. So I want us to think for a second about it. Here's a remark by an author I read about some time ago, and I thought to share with you a piece that I came across sometime when I was reading about editing, and by Audrey Fryer. And she said, I learned the hard way about the importance of a good editor. The first book I ever self-published received a review on Goodreads that went something like this. My biggest problem with this book was the lack of editing. An editor would have made this book so much more enjoyable. Ouch, this review stung, but it forced me to think, to make a helpful realization. I couldn't be both the writer and the editor. Even if I often took pride in my language and grammatical skills, I needed a second set of eyes to catch all the typos and inconsistencies I overlooked. Motivated by this review, I found a professional editor within my budget to give my first book the published finish it deserved. That was by Audrey Fryer in relation to editing. And so whether your book is nonfiction or fiction, or it's a children's book or any other genre, an editor is a priceless asset that you need to have. An editor will offer suggestions for revisions and criticisms to help you make your book more effective, to make it the best it can be. And almost all the time, first-timers, first authors or writers who are just coming out with their first book require a thorough procedure when it comes to editing, regardless of the fact that, of course, some experienced authors can possibly finish their work with just maybe one round of editing. As a newcomer in the writing industry or writing sector, it is important that our work goes through series of editing. Therefore, this evening, we're going to be talking about who an editor is, the importance of an editor in your book writing journey, finding an editor for your work, and then negotiating the best deals with an editor. Editors are professionals who work in a wide range of industries, including newspapers, TV houses, books, publishing firms, and the rest of them. They help creatives like you and I to hone our skills, to own our concepts, and edit our work in a skilled manner. There are actually many different kinds of editors when you think about it, but literary editors are the ones that actually work with us as writers that help us to polish our writing. And trust me, contrary to popular misconceptions, proofreading is not the only thing editors do. We've come to believe that, oh, all they just do is check our spellings, check punctuations, and then the rest of that. No, that is not it. Editing is not as simple as you might want to think at any point in time. It often involves a process of reading through your entire book, reading through the manuscript, writing notes that are detailed based on what the editor has read, completing an editor's report, and that is a lot of work. I mean, it's a huge work if you think about it. Fact-checking the information that the author has put in place just to be sure that such information, they're actually correct and they're just not, they are correct, and you're churning out information that people can actually check and find to be correct. And also they provide feedback on content or any other additions that they think your work might require. And so, like I said, when it comes to publishing, it is something that you cannot but get involved in. And so we want to ask this question: what does a book editor really do? I mean, I've said a couple of things, but what are the things they actually do? So one, an editor reads your manuscripts. They have to read what you've written. Once a manuscript is received, the assigned editor reads through it and determines whether it should go out or if it should go out for review or if it should be desk rejected. And when I say desk rejected, I basically mean once it comes in, the editor looks at your work and says, no, I'm not going to waste my time with this. This is not up to the standard. And then at that point, the work is rejected. So basically, it is dropped off immediately and then not providing some kind of next steps on it. But if your work passes this stage, and then with that initial read, the editor will likely make notes about the strengths and weaknesses in your work, and then sends out a book for review. That's where the reviewers are able to identify things that you can work on immediately and things that can be moved on to the next level. Secondly, an editor makes corrections on your work. Oh, yes, they do. An editor can edit, rewrite, and ask you to rewrite your piece of work, or even the entire work. It's not up if it's not up to the standard of the publishing firm that you're working with, or the standard of whoever the editor is. The editor will help you in correcting spelling errors, grammatical errors, and the rest of that. Pinpointing issues that they've noticed with capitalization and punctuation and a whole lot of other things. I can recall an instance some years back. I recall a post made by Okada Books on their social media platform. And then they talked about, it was a post about naughty words that would show up with a wrong spelling after publication, even after reading, and a lot of people were putting in their comments, and then you're wondering, oh, after I've read and read and read this piece, where did that come from? Sometimes our eyes do not catch those little foxes, as I like to refer to them. So you definitely need a second eye or a third eye or even a fourth eye to be able to go through your piece and to check through. Because if you ask me, those words can really be very annoying when you find them after you're done publishing. Like, what? Where did you come from? Sis, those words have been there all along. They're just lurking in the dark and then no one could see it. But the work of an editor is to find out such words, be able to see them, bring them out and correct them before they go out for publishing. Thirdly, editors make suggestions for your work. They help you to analyze your work for clarity and consistency, and help to enhance ideas in addition to correcting your spelling and punctuation mistakes. So you see, their work goes beyond just proofreading. They will make sure your work flows logically and then change the pace of your thinking. If they think that, yes, that has to be done, or that has to be adjusted in a way that would go in line with the nature of your writing. And sometimes on request, editors can also check your work for consistency with a particular style. There are different literary genres, and they have different features. And it is important for you to know the tropes of all the different features when you're writing. So an editor that is specialized in a particular area would help you in aligning your ideas, in aligning your writing to go in line with that particular literary genre. So that's where the editor helps to improve your work and fine-tunes your story, steering it in a specific direction. And I would say usually a marketing one, because if your story is not marketable, most editors, most publishing firms will not pick it up. And it is the work of the editor to help you to highlight ideas that can work. I've worked with a number of adult writers and also children writers. And most importantly, one thing I'm always doing when I'm working with them, of course, as a writing ideas mentor, beyond just being an editor, is to look at this idea is sellable. Okay, this story idea is sellable. If it's the kind of story that somebody would just bring out and then put on the bookstore shelf and it will lie there for a long time, then it's not going to do anybody good. And so your editor is the one that helps you to enhance the key elements of your work and highlight those areas where your readers would be paying a lot of attention. So others at times may be able to provide you with imaginative recommendations. They could tell you, you can leave this character out, or this line of thoughts may not work, or maybe you want to consider another sequence of events. So those are things that your editors can do. So editing, in essence, basically has to do with revising or moving entire paragraphs or sentences, or adding new materials to fill missing gaps in your work. Also deleting ambiguous or superfluous materials that they can find in your piece. And at the end of the day, what you find is your work is better placed than when you actually started it. So this brings me to my next question, and I'm sure the question is on the mind of many authors. Do book editors really do much editing? I mean, if you give them the work, do you get this kind of results back? Or if I'm to rephrase that, what is the importance of an editor in the writing process? The first thing you need to understand is that the writing process is not complete without editing and proofreading. So if you're going through the stages, this is something I discuss with my young budding writers every time. You must be very familiar and try to work with the stages in the writing process. You cannot sideline one for the other. And editing and proofreading they're a very vital part of that process. They support the efficacy of your writing, and also they help with the coherence of your thoughts. They aid you in making your writing more successful and your ideas more understandable for your readers. And as such, when you have an editor, they're able to work with you in such a way that your piece is made simple for the readers to understand. It's ultimately, I think it boils down to one thing: making it flow better for the reader, so that when your reader is reading, there's a line of thought that is being passed across, such is easily comprehended. Secondly, I believe very strongly, your editor can enhance your word choice and usage, and that can improve your story in no small measure. I can remember an instance. So we had this young boy who was writing his book, and because one of the things that we discuss with the children when they're writing is ensure that you're not using the old, boring, and common words that we can find. I mean, those words, readers are too used to them. They make no meaning. They paint no pictures in anybody's head. And so it is important for you to come up with new words, fresh words that at least will put even the readers on their toes to try to find out what the meaning is. And so this young boy went on using the dictionary and the thesaurus and was coming up, churning out some very big words. And as much as those words were quite fascinating, they just did not fit into the context of the story he was working on. And so we had to have a discussion about it. Oh, I think you need to look at these words. I think you might need to consider this. So those are the things that your editor will do with you. Some words can be amazing, but they might not fit into the line of thought of what you're writing. And as such, the editors would possibly ask you to consider the use of better words that can help. I mean, just changing the word said to exclaim or retorted or gosh or demanded changes the whole picture entirely when you're writing. And then at the end of the day, you have better pictures being painted in your reader's mind when they write, and that is the work of your editor. And then thirdly, everyone makes errors. We all make mistakes when we're working. In normal life, we're bound to make mistakes. And so since you're the one doing the writing, since you're the one writing and working on your piece, and you're already too familiar with your work, it's very easy to miss out on those words. It is actually, I can tell you, unfortunately, practically impossible for you to catch all the errors in your own work. And so hiring an editor means that you won't have to worry about publishing or submitting your documents with these humiliating mistakes, the kind that Audrey had in her piece. And so at the end of the day, your work is at its best when you have an editor. Simply said, editing is what makes your writing stand out. So let's talk about types of editing now very quickly. There are different layers of editing, and these are things I think we should look at. So when you have an editor, there are different levels of work that they do for you, and the different levels are in the details. So the first level has to do with chapters. So the editor works with you at the based on structural and developmental edits. So at the structural level, when it comes to structural edits, the editor is focused on reorganizing the structure of your text. Okay, you might think, oh, maybe you could start the story from this point, or why don't you consider including this landscape or including this theme, So it's a total restructuring of your text at that point in time. So, and then at that point as well, because it is structural, it can take away repetitions and ramblings and things that don't add to the story in essence, and then probably suggest new content for the work. And also at that level, the next stage will be the developmental edit, and that is the stage where the editor helps to review and provide a written report on the book structure and content. So based on what the editor has seen in your work, and you have a report that tells you, this is what I see and this is what I think we can work on. And all of this is done based at the chapter level. So At that point, it has to do with the old book. And then when you go further, you have editors. When it comes to copy editing, they review paragraph structures and sentences to ensure that there is some form of readability, there is some form of tone, there is some form of pace that your work has. And that is at the point of looking at the paragraphs and the sentences that you've used in conveying your message. And then lastly, you have, when it comes to the words, that's where you have the proofreading, which is the last stage, which is often what we think editors do, but that is often the last stage of in the writing process. So that is the point where the editors check your work for spelling and grammar and punctuation, and to ensure that there is some sort of consistency that runs through your piece, through the work. Invariably, when we have types of editing, it means that we have different types of editors, which you are going to be working with at some point in time during your work. So first and foremost, we have developmental editors, like I mentioned earlier. And when it comes to developmental editing, we're talking about major structuring or restructuring of your work, as the name applies, okay? As the name implies, yeah? Major structuring of your work, developing your piece in a very structural manner. So that is the point the developmental editor works when it comes to your work. At this point, they're able to key points the fact that book editing is, at this point, I need to explain. One key point is the fact that book editing is a skilled work. It is not just something somebody wakes up one day and begins to do. It requires some form of training, it requires experience, and then it requires some gut feeling by the editor. This means that whatever editor that you intend to work with, they should be people who can deliver high quality edits on your book. Because, I mean, book edit is not just about a hit and run or hit and miss process. They have to get it right. It has clear guidelines and best ways in which these things are to be done. And so when it comes to developmental editing, it is important that even though there is no educational requirement at that point, it is important to have at least that the editors are at least first degree holders and they understand what they're doing. Because during the book process, there are so many questions your editors have to be able to ask. And that comes with understanding, that comes with skill, that comes with having learned what literature is in essence. They have questions like, does the structure of the book make sense? Is there a wider story throughout the story? Does the sequence of events in the story make sense? Does each scene contain enough description, or each chapter, does it contain enough use of words to make the story vivid in the reader's imagination? Are there obvious plot holes that one needs to address? Are the characters sufficiently developed? So there are so many questions that such a person has to ask. So it is important that you have a skilled editor working with your piece and doing based on what you want to do. Of course, we know that creative writing on its own is a complex work. It is not as simple as people would think. I mean, it's very easy to just pick your pen and write a story, but when you want to write for a particular audience and you want to be able to pass a message across, then you know that you have to follow certain steps. And if that is the case, then we know that editing itself is a complex process that requires some level of skill to be able to do. And that's something I believe very strongly you should be able to look out for. Now, secondly, we have the copy editing. And when it comes to copy editing, we're talking about the process of reviewing, evaluating, and editing your writing, okay, to make it more readable and to correct any flaws that is evident there. So on their own, make sure that everything is consistent, and they seek for ways to improve the readability of your book by ensuring that the sentences flows smoothly. I'm sure sometimes when you write when you do your own piece, you write and you try to read. Sometimes you find some spots a bit clumsy. They're not able to read through properly. You need to adjust something, and it is often advised that is done loudly. So copy editors look out for such situations, for such sentences where there is no smooth flow, to be able to correct it and ensure that yes, there's a smooth flow in the work. And then most copy editors too, they double as fact checkers. I know that I've had to edit books for people that I have to research myself and be sure that the information that is going out, because at the end of the day, it comes back to the editor. Oh, you edited this piece and this information was wrong, so most times your editor would double as a fact checker. Research, be sure that the information that is being given in your book or in your piece of work is actually correct and it is not falsified. And let's move on very quickly to line editing. At this stage, you're talking about consistency and clarity. This type of editing is very detailed and it is focused on precision. And when I mean precision, it involves trying to ensure consistency of character, story, and setting. You want to be sure that the characters that you have in your story are well situated in the setting, and also that such characters follow the story plots adequately. You also want to ensure that details that you have added actually contributes to the story rather than distracts from them. And lastly, as a line editor, they want to ensure that your story is loudly shown, not to, that common thing that we say, show, do not tell, all right? So it is the line editor most time that want to see through the lines, walk through the pieces. And of course, we're talking about chapters and we're talking about paragraphs and lines at this point in time. And so they want to check that everything flows smoothly. And proofreading, like we all know, basically, that is the stage where you go through the spelling, you go through the capitalization, you go to punctuation, you go to grammar. All of this might appear simple, but trust me, it is very amazing that a lot of people write and they overlook some of these things. I know at some point in time, we've had to visit a particular government office in terms of having one of our books be reviewed, and it was a story of, oh, look at this book, they couldn't use it because of this issue with the spelling. Look at this, we mentioned very notable people in the society that we know, and we're like, oh, see, because of all these errors, it would amaze you what all of these things do. And then that buttresses the point to a very large extent why having an editor work with your piece is really, really very, very important. When editing, and I just want to add this very quickly, the proofreading stage, when editing your piece, the proofreader would always use signs like this, like you can see on my screen. So those marks are known as proofreading symbols, and they help you to, identify different areas or different issues that have been noticed in your piece of work. And there are a secret set of guidelines. They are not things that everybody would naturally know, but suffice me to say that most editors will share these details with you, will explain to you so that you understand what this means and how they work, because otherwise they appear like Greek to anyone, you know how when you visit your doctor and they write prescription for you. Most times, I don't know about you, I'm not able to read the prescriptions that these doctors write, but funny enough, the pharmacists are able to read it and tell you, oh, these are the drugs that have been prescribed for you. So sometimes those things they write appear as good. That is what it is when it comes to proofreading. So you have symbols that are being used, marks, more like a collection of squiggly lines or words, and which meaning might be lost to you if you don't know what each symbol stands for. But I think very strongly that a good editor will share those details with you. And it is actually very important to be able to go through this proofreading stage to do that. All right, I want us, before we go on, to look at this very quickly. It says, a lot can change in the editing room. I want us to discuss this very quickly. It's been a bit silent. Okay, like I said, I can learn from you as well. So let us look at this quote by Dan Lane. It says, a lot can change in the editing room. What do you think? What does that mean? What lot can change? If you don't mind, I'd like to get responses from everyone. You can unmute yourself. If you have to talk, just wave your hands and explain, or you want to drop it in the chat box. Let's do that. Take 2 minutes to do that very quickly. Please, let's hear from you too. Who can explain to us what this, when it says a lot can change in the editing, what do you think this means?
Okay, so are you referring to the fact that the editor can move around your paragraphs, you know, your chapters, the fact that the editor can perhaps trim out words that you feel are absolutely essential and things like that? They can even maybe suggest a change in your book cover title.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am. Yes, basically. So the editing room to me can just appear like a theater room, okay, surgical room, where you go into, and then a lot of things change. All right. So by the time a book goes into the editing room, it comes out almost like a completely different book at the end of the day. And you can tell how much work is being done based on this by the editor. Thank you very much for that feedback. So I'll move on. So at this point, it's time to move our conversation to talks about how to find an editor and to help with your manuscript, how to negotiate the best book deals while working with your editor. Remember, our focus for this conversation is on traditional publishing, looking for publishing deals. And so our idea is about how to get a publishing firm to accept our work and then to be able to have us published. Of course, I mean, this doesn't rule out the fact that we can self-publish or we can go the hybrid publishing way. But like I said, if you get it right with traditional publishing, then it becomes a lot easy when it comes to self-publishing, because once you raise your standard in that regard, then it's easy for you to follow through even as a self-publisher as well. So one thing I believe you need to do first to be able to get the interest or to be able to get a publishing firm to be interested in your work is to add substance to your idea. Any books project, the central theme or the central theme or premise is based on the concept that that book is passing out. So when a writer or agent submits a weak or incorrect notion or incorrect theme or incorrect ideas to a publishing firm, the editors become really very frustrated. I don't know if we have teachers among us, but I know that as a teacher of creative writing, sometimes you get exasperated when you're reading someone's script, and when there is some kind of when the piece is incoherent, you're not able to make head or tail about it. And you know, those are the kind of pieces that you just drop on at the bottom of your work. And you know what, you know, I'm going to come back to that later. Let me just deal with this. Maybe when I'm in a very good mood, I'm going to work on that piece. So that's the way it is for editors as well. So editors have learned to choose concepts with a compelling premise, a compelling idea, an idea that extends beyond just now. You know, ideas that are lively, that are intense, that are practical, that are clear and are visionary, particularly, you know, that is able to look at the future and foresee, like we say sometimes, writers are prophets, okay? And so be able to see works that are like that. So they're looking for works by writers that can pique readers' interest, raise their blood pressure, or keep readers seated at the head of their seats. And when I try, you know, there are some books you hold in your hands, and you're just like that, you know, you're too engrossed in the book. You don't want to drop it. Those are the kind of pieces that editors are looking for. And so it behooves you as a writer, when you're writing, for you to be able to come up with exciting ideas that would capture the interest of anyone that is that wants to work on your piece. So they seek out writers with fresh insight. And so think about it. Does your work has a unique perspective on a subject that is significant to a lot of readers? They want authors with a strong sense of purpose for their concepts and narratives, you know, who bring maturity, who bring knowledge, who bring their passion to the work that they do. And so when you reach out to them and you have this substance in your idea, it's very easy to get the attention of publishing firms through this and get a very good deal through your editor. Also, it is important for you to provide a thorough and compelling proposal as a writer. You know, you need to have a proposal written that captures the essence of your work and make it the best it can be. Let it be as strong as it can truly be, you know, presenting it to an agent or presenting it to an editor. And you must also keep in mind that you're marketing yourself as a writer. And as such, everything you do and everything you write can make an impact on the world. So be sure that you have a proposal that has a very strong point, that has a way of impacting the world. I would usually tell young writers I work with, you need to make an impact in the world. As much as you write for entertainment, be sure that your work addresses something that is interesting in the world that people can relate with. And if you're able to do that, it is easy for you to be able to get publishing firms to be interested in your work. And also beyond having a compelling proposal for your work, in that proposal, it is important for you to have to describe your platform, to describe your level of education, to describe your professional background. These are things that you can begin to prepare and get ready in the hope of getting publishing deals. You know, to describe your professional background, your writing experience, your past or present media appearances, plans for websites or the blogs that you do, everything that can market you. I'm the kind of person, I'm a very private person, and sometimes you work with that concept that please, you know, I'm very humble. I don't want, please, I've learned that it is important for us to blow our trumpets. It is important for you to be out there. I mean, you're a light. You cannot light a candle and put it under a bushel. It has to be out there. So when you're passing your message across, when you're coming up with a proposal, it is important for you to celebrate every good thing about you so that they're able to recognize you and see that, yes, with your work, you're able to deliver at this level. And thirdly, it is important for you to get your own literary agents. I'm not very sure how it works in Nigeria, and in terms of getting publishing deals. Most importantly, I know that there are a whole lot of competitions and the rest of that. But I know outside of Nigeria, in the UK, in basically overseas, you have agents, literary agents that promote your work. And so I think it is best to be able to find one that would work with you, that understands your kind of writing or what genre you write about, and who is familiar with editors and publishers who work in that terrain. Because literature has different strands. And so when you're able to get an agent that works with, that is in line with your kind of work, in line with your kind of story or your kind of writing, they're able to deliver to you good deals. Such literary agents would often have relationship with publishing firms that would help you to strike good bargain deals for your project work. And as such, it is important for you to think of a literary agent that can work with you as a writer. That said, you probably want to know where to look for a book editor, okay, or a publishing firm editor. I think the best way is to go online. I mean, it is just on at a click. You can just research online to be able to get editors that that can work with you based on what you do. Unfortunately, based on the different things, digital things that are going on everywhere, that are ongoing in the world, there are a whole lot of editors everywhere around, okay, and with different price ranges that you can work with, and you can get these people without even leaving your homes, just online them. Another thing I think you can do would be to determine whether an editor's abilities match your kind of work or what you need to be done. And so you might want to request a sample edit of whatever it is that that you're doing. So sample edits would be, oh, this is my work. Why don't you just edit this little bit of it? And then when they do that, to be able to ascertain, oh, if this is making sense, or if this is working for me against other different editors that you might want to check. And then regarding costs, the more time, you should know that the more time an editor spends on your work or your book, the more expensive the editing becomes at the end of the day. So if you have a book that has 1,000 pages, then you're going to be paying a lot. And that doesn't mean paying a lot is, oh, it's a waste of money. You have so much, you want a lot of work to be done. You want quality work to be done. The editor is going to be spending more hours, and definitely they're going to be requesting for more pay than someone that is just doing like a 10-page book or 100-page book or something. And typically book editors are paid by the hour or by word, most times by the hour. And so depending on how long your book is, it will determine the number of hours, depending on the number of words they will have, and then the amount that they are going to charge you for the work that they're going to do for you. However, I think before you enlist an editor, it is important for you to ask certain questions, okay? Because you want to be sure that the choice of your editor is right, as it will determine the kind of book deals that you get eventually. So first, you must ask, are these editors, is this editor seasoned? Is this editor well-trained? And one thing you know is excellent editors are constantly busy. And so you should exercise caution if you find an editor that is readily available to do the work right away, or is quoting rates that are really, really very low. You know that they might not probably do a very good job. It is not a cast in stone idea, but it is a way to check. And like I said, you could always request a sample edit to know what they're doing. You could also request to see some of their past work, so that you can see what they can do for you, and ensure that your book is getting the right kind of attention that it deserves. Secondly, you need to ask, do they focus on a certain genre? Because an editor that is focused on, let's say, poetry, might not be able to give you a proper work when it's fiction. It's not to say that they would not. But of course, when you're a specialist or you're an expert in an area, it means that, oh, you're probably going to be prone to deliver excellently at a particular level in that particular field more than other fields, okay? Just like you have in a school, you have a mathematics teacher who is an expert, and you have a literacy. The mathematics teacher, most in general, would be able to teach mathematics effectively if that person is an excellent, it's a good, is a qualified graduate or a qualified worker or teacher at whatever level of expectation that is required. And so an editor with genre knowledge, specific genre knowledge, you'll be able to comprehend your writing. But more precisely, that editor would be able to anticipate what your readers want, because they know this is the trope. They know these are the features. A dystopian writer would differ to a Gothic writer. A mystery writer, or a thriller writer, or what would I say, fantasy writer would definitely differ in the ways they write. So if you have an editor who is focused on a particular genre, and that is the genre that you are working on, they're able to deliver a better result to you from my own perspective, because they are more familiar with the tropes of that genre and where your book will fit into in the overall schemes of things when it comes to publishing. And also, like I said, always request that simple edit. Every competent editor will provide you with a free sample edit. I would say, please, 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 please go away from an editor that is not ready to provide you with this service. The first, usually the first 200 to 500 words of your book will usually be edited with no charge, so that you have an idea. An editor that says they cannot do that for you, please, I would say leave them and then look for someone else, because you need to know how good I am to be able to give you my book to work on. So one thing you must know is that editing is typically a waste of time if it doesn't go through those stages that I highlighted earlier on, okay, in terms of the structural, developmental, and copy editing and proofreading. It is important that all of these go through, your work goes through that, with the greatest issues being addressed first, and then the minor issues addressed later on through line-by-line editing, through rewriting and proofreading. Those are things that are very, very important. So finally, I want to say, as a writer, it is critical that you do understand the function of editors and what they can do to assist you to elevate your book to a publishable standard. It is very, very important. You must be sure you know the appropriate questions to ask them and what will work best for you and your book if you want them to do your work, and if you want to locate the right editor. Look online, search for them, and then find who works for them. And so, in response to our $1 million question tonight, do you need an editor as a writer? I will say that every writer needs an editor before being published. And my response is the same, whether you're looking to self-publish your work, or you're looking to go through the traditional route, or you want to do the hybrid publishing way. Everyone needs an editor. Even strong writers with outstanding credentials, they do need an editor to work with. Trust me, your Jeff Kinney, your Roald Dahl, your Dr. Seuss, Mrs. Abodere Talabi, every writer needs an editor to work to, regardless of what ton of writing experience that they do have. And I know sometimes as writers, we can become emotionally attached to our work, to our books, and might not be very open-minded to change some parts. I mean, I submitted a work for publishing, and it came back from the editor today. And it said, the first line was, "Quite frankly, I'm not a fan of this at all at this point." And my initial reaction was, hello, this is a story that has been well celebrated, and I'm so looking forward to finishing work on it. And what was it talking about? But I sat there and I went through his feedback, and his feedback was based on the collection that we're doing, the publishing thing, the publishing theme that we're working on. This idea would not work. You talked about this other idea. Why can't we revisit that idea? And as such, and I started to see and understand from his point of view, and I became open-minded to say, okay, I think I'm going to work on this, and it's either I turn the story over or I come up with another one. So yes, it can be traumatizing, or would I say traumatic at times, to read such comment, but trust me, it is in your own best interest. What makes it difficult to judge our own work is basically because of that emotional attachment. And so you cannot judge your work just from your own perspective and accept that, oh, this is the best that it can be, and then move on with it. It is important that you work on it. And like I said earlier, it is very, very easy to unintentionally omit important things in our work. It is not because you plan to do that, but it's just because, yes, that's just the way we think we want to go. Or you might just spell a word improperly. So you need someone to go through it and check for you. And because at this point, you need to understand that brands are about editing. I would say we should discuss this, but I know that our time is fast spent, and so we need to move on. When I talk about brands are about editing, it is about revisiting your work and making it better at every point in time. That's how you create your brand. That's how you work on it. And the quality of the writers whose work an editor is editing has little to do with the adjustment. So it doesn't mean that, oh, because you are this, that, oh, your work is impossible to have errors. No. And it doesn't mean that it brings you down as a writer. Editors actually represent a wise investment in promoting your work and improving your reputation as a writer through offering you the best or better ways to look at ideas. So for me, very strongly, in my own opinion, editing should be a necessary part of our work rather than luxury, because your reputation is, I would say, indescribably valuable. And as such, you don't want to tamper with it. Editors are very, very important, and they are very necessary. And then with that, I come to the end of my presentation this evening. Thank you so much for listening. I hope without doubt, I've been able to convince you and not confuse you that you do need editors as a writer. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you so much, Adeola. That was fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Fantastic session, great insights. More than ever, we now know that, yes, we do need to have editors. And, you know, I have had my own share of experiences. You know, if everything I write, even if it's a paragraph, I will tell somebody, please, lend me your eyes, have a look. You know, like you said, your eyes are trained to see what they want to see sometimes. You will always see what you want to see. So even if it is Adeola that is written there, your eyes will tell you, no, it's Adeola that I wrote, because your eyes want to see Adeola.
Yeah.
So it's so important that, you know, you've reiterated the fact that we need to, no matter how good everybody, no matter how gifted, no matter how experienced a writer you are, you must hand over your work to give it through the, you know, take your work through that process. It is compulsory. So you save yourself from needless embarrassment over just a minute error that can change the meaning of what you want to express, you know. And it just brings me to, you know, I remember there was you know, some book review we did with some ladies, and we were trying to review someone's book, and it was quite embarrassing because she kept on apologizing about all the errors in her manuscript. She kept on apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you know, it just shows things are not perfect. Oh, I'm sorry. And it was a, you know, it was a bit embarrassing for her. And, you know, to be honest, nobody left there impressed. We all just thought this person is tardy, which is not the case. She just didn't give her work to an editor. That was just the mistake. She's a very organized woman. So thank you for showing and for reiterating why we must make sure our work is edited, and not just edited by anybody, but we take it through that whole process. You mentioned how we need to do our homework, you know, find out who has this person reviewed for, do they have any training, what's the somebody who just, you know, who doesn't have any training, or who is not, you know, not even a graduate, just I can edit, so, you know, be wary of that, because the person might end up making your work worse than it is. You also spoke about the emotional attachment that we have to our work sometimes, which makes it difficult to hand it over to someone to edit. But we should take it. We should allow them. We should be, you know, as long as we're sure we've chosen correctly, let them do what they need to. Let them give you their suggestions. You know, because, and even for me, when I edit anyone's work, I always give them. I will, you know, I always use that thing that shows you this is how it is. This is what I've done. So I use one and can actually see that it actually looks better with these my suggestions. You know, and it's up to you to take it. And you know, we're going to open the floor for questions now. And before I do that, yeah, if you have any questions, you can put them in the comment box and I'll read them out. But before we go for questions, there's something that you said I think is also very important to reiterate. When you're choosing an editor, you have to think also of the cultural inclinations. For instance, if I'm writing a book, and you know, a storybook about Nigeria, and I'm using an American editor who doesn't have any idea, who has not been exposed to such, she might not get some things. She might not. You have to be conscious of this. So I want us, you know, especially us, you know, Nigerians, to, as much as possible. I have an American editor. I've used, you know, a lot. My main, she's from the US, but as much as possible, let us use people who can connect to our story, who understand what this means, who understands when they say you know, I'm having a bucket and a bus overseas. People don't really do those things because so I want us to open the doors to questions. Please can drop them in the comment box. Let me read it out for you, Adeola. From Irene, how do editors work on children's picture books, especially for translation purposes?
All right. So I'm gonna talk about this. I remember a research work I did on the environment, talking about the environment, the representation of environments in Nigerian, in African text, African children's text. And one of the things I talked about was illustration. Now, pictures on their own are a whole different topic. And as an editor, pictures, so when you talk about picture books, there is the tendency that they have fewer words. It is important that the pictures illustrate the words there. So beyond editing, the grammar, the proofreading, the ideas, the thoughts, marketing details, and the rest of that, it is important that the pictures talk the story without the words. So an editor would look at a piece of work and look at the pictures that have been used to identify the piece of work and say, no, this does not go at this point in time. We're talking about either the structural editor, the developmental editor, and the structural editor. So at that point, you're talking about looking at the whole structure of the book. If this is the illustration, so I looked at illustrations then, and I said, looked at certain works, looked at Benokri's works, Every Leaf a Hallelujah, looked at a couple of other works, and I was like, the illustration depicts the text. So an editor will look at it, does this illustration actually tell the story, even without the words? And at that point, you'll be able to decide, oh, I think you need to adjust the picture. I think you need to adjust how, or the text or whatever it is that you're using to illustrate the other. And so basically, I believe that is how editors work. That is how I work when it comes to editing children's books. You look at the pictures, you look at the story, and you say, yes, this picture is, and you know that there's a whole lot of work with picture reading on its own. I can have pictures tell a story. So there are books that are just plain pictures. And when you look at the picture, you know the theme of the book, you know the theme of the story. I, as an editor, should be able to look at the piece and say, yes, this tells the theme or the title or the topic of this book that I'm writing about. This has actually been well done, or you need to readjust this. It can be in terms of the color, it can be in terms of the design, it can be in terms of so many things. So there's a whole lot that goes into that.
Okay,
when it comes to children's book, yeah.
Thank you for that answer. That makes sense. It's, the pictures are a very important element of every children's book. So yes, very important. So this next question says that some say that between the manuscript and the final book, there can be as many as 7 drafts. So that's going back and forth. This is done, that is done. It goes back to the editor, it goes back to the author. In your experience, how many draft versions should a children's author be prepared to go through to get an error-free book?
I think that depends on the strength of the writer as a writer. All right. So if you're able to develop a piece that is good, so to say, I mean, you talked about an instance where you had someone come in and the book had a lot of errors, and then the person was embarrassed. It shows, okay, maybe this person has little or not much strength in writing. And as such, if a book is turned out by that person, the editor has a lot of work to do. So you cannot say it is a fixed thing. Most, if I'm to look at an experienced writer, most times their work might just be edited once because they know all the tropes. Take, for instance, when we work with children and we say our goal at Jordan Hill is to make children better writers. So they become published authors along the way. The experience is supposed to make them a better writer so that when they're writing their next book, it comes out better than the first one. So an experienced writer would have gained a lot of writing experience in terms of, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. These are the ideas I'm supposed to work on. So for that person, it would be probably one or two editorial process that will be maintained. But for somebody that is new, or somebody that the writing is not very good, or somebody that is just starting out, you cannot decide. It depends on the strength of that person as a writer. And then also it depends on the strength of the editor, the skills of the editor, depending on how competent the editor is to be able to see errors. I say as little as just making an Instagram post. I have a page on my phone. I can send the message to myself like 20 times before I finally post it. I see one error. Each time I look at it, I see one error. And so it all depends. It is not a fixed thing. It depends on the skills and the expertise of the writer and the editor as well.
All right, and that's very, very well said. It really does depend on how good a manuscript it is, or how many changes have to be made. Like you said, you mentioned different directions. Not only are they, a lot of people think it's just to proofread. That is just one aspect of editing. Sometimes you have to change names. I remember I saw someone's manuscript. It was very well written, but she misspelled some tribal names. And I saw it. I was like, do you mean nobody from this tribe, or nobody? You don't know anybody from this tribe? I could have asked, how do you spell this name? And for me, so that was it. It stood out because I kept on seeing that error. But otherwise, it was well written. So some people are very good writers, but it could just be one or two things that need to be changed. Perspective, maybe like you said, you mentioned that sometimes it has to be like, oh, some facts, fact finding or fact checking. This is not, this isn't accurate too. This is not how it's done here. So you might need to look at that and research it more. And that's interesting because I had always thought the onus was on the author to make sure she did her fact finding and fact checking properly. But also the editor also has part of that to say, look, I'm not too sure about that. Check. Exeter is not in the north of England. It's actually down south. So you need to correct that and see. So it's really, really a very, very huge job, very and a very necessary job as well. So thank you so much, Adeola. I'm looking to see if we have any more comments or questions. Do we have any more questions for Adeola? Okay, so somebody wants to she's raised her hand, so I'm going to ask her to unmute so she can ask. And that's Chigozie. So please go ahead.
Okay, hello everyone. I'd like to thank the speaker for an excellent presentation on this topic. She's really done justice to it. Thank you so much. What I really want to say is sometimes it's a bit of a comment. I hadn't actually thought about the idea of us asking editors to do some portion of our work free, so we can have an idea of how they work. But I know that some editors request that not because they want to do free work personally, but because they want to know how badly this work needs editing, so they know what to charge. Because they are like Choma was saying that they looked at a manuscript that had a lot of errors, and then sometimes people send in manuscripts for editing that are almost flawless, and I think that's literally an editor's delight when they've done a lot of proofreading and grammatical corrections on their own, so you can focus on the bigger picture of developmental editing, copy editing, and line editing. So it's a nice thought for me. I've learned that today, that we can actually ask for that. And I want to thank you for that. Another thought that came to my mind, someone asked a question about editing for translation. I think where one can afford it, if you can have two different translators look at the work, it actually gives you some measure of confidence, especially if it's a language you're not very confident about. You can't tell how good this translation was. So so those are my thoughts about it. Awesome work. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, ACAIN, for this lovely topic. Thank you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Chigozie, for that great contribution. Fantastic. Chigozie, I think a lot of us do edit. I think it's a job that a lot of people don't understand what it takes. I don't do more than 1 or 2 editing jobs in a year, if at all. And people just think, and they're throwing figures. I'm like, no, it's a lot of work, and it's painstaking as well, because you want to make sure it's properly done. And some people, like you said, are very emotional. So you ask, you query something, and they're like, no. I was like, no, this doesn't work. So you have to be mindful that you have to be a percent of your work to be edited. Some things might have to go. Some things might need to be, it's like getting like a haircut, isn't it? Sometimes you have to take off the sides, and might have to add some extensions here and there to make sure everything comes together nicely. So thank you so much, Adeola. Do we have any other contributions, questions? So we can let us all go. It's been a fantastic evening, very enlightening. Thank you so much, Adeola. It's been okay. Thank you. I would like to say good night to everybody. It's been a great evening. We've had a good time. We've learned a lot. And I'm sure it was very, 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 just for me, it was good. And for all of us, I'm sure we're like, okay, good, I'm on the right path. Like, Miriam said, good, I need to do so much more. Oh, you never graduate from this school. Even if you're the more you're writing, the more editing you need. Trust me. Yes, it might be less, but you still need to get it done, because the bigger your brand, the less embarrassment you want, just because of one tiny error. So thank you so much for being here. Good night, and see you in April at our next workshop, everyone.